Hi, welcome to your online IELTS preparation course. Today we're going to look at phrasal verbs, a very important part of the English vocabulary, very common in spoken and written English, so you need to understand these to speak naturally. Phrasal verbs are formed with a verb plus preposition or adverb. We sometimes call them verb plus participle. You can also use a verb plus preposition as a collocation. These are called grammar collocations. The difference is the meaning of the verb does not change. With a phrasal verb, when you add a participle, so that's a preposition or adverb, you have to learn it as a phrase. The meaning of the verb is actually irrelevant to that. So if you're just learning a word and what preposition to follow, it's not always a phrasal verb, so be very careful here. Okay, as I've said, it's only a phrasal verb is if when you put the two words together, it changes the meaning, okay? They form an idiom, so that's where if you translate the individual words, it does not make sense. They're very, very, very common in English. I'm sure you have seen them before. Some students love them and some students hate them. It's just a good idea when you learn them, just don't think about the separate verb and the separate preposition. Learn them as one word. Phrasal verbs are an informal part of English and many of them have a formal equivalent. We do have some formal phrasal verbs to use. You have to be very selective with the ones that you use. Some of them are too informal to use in formal situations. So with the IELTS exam, you are expected to use phrasal verbs, but you must be selective with the ones that you use. To learn the meaning of a phrasal verb, I strongly recommend that you learn the formal equivalent to that word. So when you learn the word, find out what the formal equivalent is and match these in your vocabulary book. We're going to look at some today, so you'll be able to put this into practice. Okay, I've given you two examples. We have to blow up. That's our verb is to blow, our preposition is up, and the formal equivalent of this word is to explode. That's what it means. You don't need any other explanation apart from that. To cut down, to cut is our verb, down the preposition, and their formal meaning is to reduce. Just be careful because a lot of phrasal verbs have more than one meaning, so it's a really good idea to learn them in context. That means when you come across them, when you find them, learn the meaning then. I've given you some more examples here. We're looking at the phrasal verb put down and the three different meanings that it can be. Have a look at the slide, make sure you understand. Other information to be aware of about phrasal verbs. Like other verbs, they can be transitive and intransitive. Okay, I've given you some examples. Get up, an intransitive phrasal verb. It does not require an object. Put off, a transitive phrasal verb, because it does need an object. So I don't like to get up. You can finish the sentence there and you don't need an object like intransitive verbs. But a transitive phrasal verb, put off, you must follow with an object. So if I just said we will have to put off, we don't know what. So with that one, it's essential to follow with an object. Phrasal verbs can also be separable and inseparable. This means you can separate or not separate the verb and preposition. So the object can go in the middle with separable phrasal verbs, but with inseparable ones, you cannot separate them. It's a really good idea to learn what phrasal verbs are separable and what phrasal verbs are separable if you want to use them accurately. Usually when a phrasal verb is transitive, they are also separable, so this is a bit of a top tip for you. Remember, that's usually, not always, so this means that the verb and preposition can be separated, and I've given you an example on the slide. So put off, we can follow with the meeting, okay? We can separate that verb and preposition and put the object in the middle. So put the meeting off. One thing to remember is that if you use an object pronoun, there is no choice. It must go between the verb and the preposition. Again, have a look at the slide for the examples. So your object pronouns are like me, it, you. If we have a look again, we can say they put it off. So that sentence is correct because we're using the pronoun and not the object itself, which is the meeting. It has to go in the middle. So we can say they put it off, but we can't say they put off it. And yet we can say they put the meeting off and they put off the meeting. So if you use the object, the actual name, it can go in the middle or at the end, but object pronoun only in the middle. So when phrasal verbs are intransitive, that means they're usually inseparable, so good rules for you to remember. So this means that the verb and the preposition cannot be separated. Have a look at the slide with the example. I don't like to get up. If I wanted to put something in the middle of that, it just wouldn't make sense. Okay? I can't separate that verb and the preposition. They have to stay together. Okay, time to put all of this into practice. On the slide, you have some phrasal verbs. I want you to spend a few seconds to see if you can think of what the formal equivalent is. Then they're going to appear on the slide, and then you need to match them to sentences. So, I want you to have a look at the slides now and do the practice activities. Now you're going to have a live listening, so I need you to open the document attached so you can have a look at the questions. I'm going to read a monologue, and I'm actually going to read this 3 times. You have to answer the questions on the question sheet. This is going to put your listening skills into good practice.